In the early hours of June 6, 1944, just past midnight, a young German soldier named Gefreiter Heinrich Sevelow sat within the concrete walls of strongpoint WN62, methodically tending to his MG42 machine gun. The bunker commanded a sweeping view of the English Channel from its position above Omaha Beach. Tucked in his pocket was correspondence from his sweetheart back in Metzingen, her words promising faithful devotion until Germany's inevitable triumph. Only 3 days prior, Sevelow had penned his own confident predictions to her, declaring that any invasion attempt would result in enemy corpses littering the beaches, their forces repelled within mere hours. His certainty had been reinforced by a recent inspection conducted by none other than Field Marshal Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox himself. During that visit, Rommel had peered through the narrow firing aperture of Sevelow's position, carefully assessed the interlocking zones of fire that covered the approaches, and expressed his satisfaction with an approving nod. The Field Marshal's words echoed in the young soldier's mind. When the enemy finally arrived, these beaches would become their final resting place. The channel waters visible through the gun port revealed nothing concerning that night, only darkness and tranquility stretching toward the horizon. The atmosphere carried an almost peaceful quality. Yet within half a day's time, this same young German would be discovered in a state of emotional collapse within his bunker, tears streaming down his face as he sat amid the physical evidence of sustained combat. 13,500 expended shell casings scattered around his position. The barrel of his weapon had become distorted from the intensity of continuous firing, and through his gun sight he had witnessed an invasion force of such overwhelming magnitude that his consciousness struggled to process the reality before his eyes. In subsequent accounts, Sevelow would assert that his gun position had inflicted between 1,000 and 2,000 enemy casualties, though military historians have determined such claims to be mathematically implausible, given that total American losses at Omaha Beach from all sources combined reached approximately 2,400 men. The true mathematics of Germany's impending defeat would be recorded not in official strategic analyses or intelligence briefings, but rather in the traumatized testimonies of soldiers who found themselves witnessing the largest amphibious military operation in recorded history from the defending side of fortified positions. The Atlantic Wall represented an ambitious defensive concept that stretched across 2,400 miles of European coastline, extending from Norwegian fjords down to the border with Spain. German propaganda had characterized this barrier as history's most formidable defensive construction. Throughout the Normandy sector specifically, 58 divisions of varying combat effectiveness occupied positions that had consumed extraordinary resources. 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel had gone into their construction. Hitler himself had made proclamations regarding the wall's impregnability. The defensive preparations along Omaha Beach alone appeared to validate such confidence. Documentation from the U.S. Army Center of Military History indicates that German engineers had constructed 8 reinforced concrete bunkers, 35 hardened pillboxes, 4 dedicated artillery positions, 18 emplacements for anti-tank weapons, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar positions. The beach itself had been systematically transformed into a death trap. Within the tidal zone, 3,700 obstacles had been planted, including Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, many of which had been topped with teller mines. Beyond the immediate beach areas, 5 million mines had been distributed throughout the defensive zones, though Rommel's original specifications had called for 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, who commanded the 916th Grenadier Regiment in the vicinity of U, had performed calculations regarding the defensive firepower concentrated in his sector. His 4 battery positions possessed the theoretical capability to deliver 120 rounds per minute into the beach zones. When combined with additional batteries in the area, German forces could concentrate devastating firepower against any landing attempt. These theoretical calculations, however, operated under an assumption that would prove catastrophically flawed: unlimited ammunition availability. The 5th day of June had brought weather conditions that Walter Stuber, the Luftwaffe meteorologist stationed in Paris, had declared completely unsuitable for invasion operations. Wind velocities had reached 20 to 25 knots, wave heights had climbed to 6 feet, and low cloud cover hung at just 500 feet elevation. Stuber, working with data collected from submarine patrols and weather monitoring stations, had provided assurances to High Command that such poor conditions would persist for a minimum of 2 weeks. Based on this meteorological assessment, numerous senior officers had departed their command posts. Rommel himself had left for Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday, having purchased a pair of grey suede shoes during a shopping excursion in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, who commanded the 7th Army, had ordered division-level commanders to participate in war games scheduled at Rennes. Even the naval patrol operations that typically swept the Channel waters had been suspended due to the rough seas. This meteorological certainty would become the Germans' first critical miscalculation. Unknown to Stuber and his staff, Allied meteorological services possessed weather monitoring stations in Greenland and conducted weather reconnaissance flights over the Atlantic that had identified a brief improvement in conditions, a 36-hour window that Group Captain James Stagg had detected and General Eisenhower had decided to exploit. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, radar installations along the Normandy coastline began registering unusual activity. The Freya and Würzburg radar systems detected massive aerial formations approaching from the north. The operators, however, had observed similar patterns before. Allied deception raids intended to maintain German forces in a heightened state of alert. By 00:30 hours on June 6th, reports began arriving that challenged all existing assumptions. Fallschirmjäger, paratrooper forces, were landing throughout the Normandy region. The reports, however, presented a confusing picture. Some units reported paratroopers in eastern sectors, others in western areas. Some claimed to have identified British forces, others American. Dummy paratroopers equipped with firecrackers, deployed as part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, contributed significantly to the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, who commanded the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was among the first German officers to comprehend the severity of the situation. Awakened by reports of paratrooper landings near his unit's positions, he immediately submitted requests for permission to launch an attack. The response from division headquarters proved frustrating. Do not initiate movement until the situation becomes clearer. Von Luck would later record in his memoir, Panzer Commander, that he understood in that moment that Germany was facing defeat. The paratroopers were obviously establishing flanking positions for a seaborne landing. Every minute spent waiting allowed them additional time to consolidate their positions. Yet German forces remained paralyzed by their own command structure. At 5:30 hours on June 6th, as the first grey illumination began to spread across the Channel waters, German observers in forward positions began reporting something for which their training had provided no preparation. Werner Ploskard, whose actual presence at the coastal positions remains a matter of dispute among historians, including Heinrich Sevelow himself, was credited in certain accounts with being among the first to report the approaching armada. What remains beyond dispute is that German observers across the entire Normandy coastline witnessed, from horizon to horizon, a sea surface covered with vessels. Not dozens of ships, not hundreds, but thousands. Vessels of every conceivable size and description, from massive battleships down to tiny landing craft, spread across the Channel like a grey carpet. According to official Allied documentation, the invasion fleet comprised 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 ancillary vessels, and 864 merchant ships. This represented the largest naval armada ever assembled in human history. For the German defenders, who had been raised on propaganda emphasizing Allied weakness and internal divisions, The sight created psychological devastation. Bernhard Furking, an artillery officer stationed at WN62, who would lose his life later that day, reportedly informed his men that they were witnessing the entire world arriving at their doorstep. At 05:35 hours, the naval bombardment commenced. Nothing in the experience of German defenders, not combat on the Eastern Front, not even the heaviest Royal Air Force bombing raids, had prepared them for what followed. The battleship USS Texas alone discharged 255 14-inch shells at Pointe du Hoc within a 34-minute period, according to Naval History and Heritage Command documentation. HMS Warspite, which holds the distinction of being the first vessel to open fire on D-Day at approximately 0500 hours, would deliver over 3 115-inch shells during the first 2 days, including 96 rounds fired at German positions on June 9th. The cumulative bombardment delivered by the naval force exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had previously encountered. According to accounts from German veterans collected by the German Federal Archives, concrete bunkers designed to withstand any bombardment began to crack and crumble under the naval gunfire. Men found themselves buried alive, excavated, and then buried again as shells continued to rain down. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the physical destruction. The fortifications in which they had placed absolute confidence were disintegrating like sandcastles. As the naval bombardment continued its relentless pounding, the Luftwaffe's response revealed the desperate reality of the German position. Oberst Josef Pips Priller, who commanded Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His response, documented in the wing's war diary, was telling. What entire force? I have 2 planes. The Luftwaffe, which had promised air superiority over any invasion attempt, could manage only 319 sorties on D-Day against 14,674 Allied sorties, according to U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence documentation. Priller and his wingman, Unteroffizier Heinz Vordach, conducted the only Luftwaffe attack on the beaches during the morning hours of June 6th, making a single strafing run on Sword Beach in their FW-190A-8 fighters before retreating from overwhelming Allied fighter cover. This solitary strafing attack by 2 aircraft against an invasion force numbering in the thousands became symbolic of German impotence. The promised Knights of the Air, who would supposedly darken the skies over any invasion, had been reduced to a futile gesture. At 6:30 hours, the first assault waves struck the beaches. German defenders, despite the bombardment they had endured, manned their surviving positions and opened fire. What followed was carnage that shocked even veteran soldiers. Heinrich Sevelow, the machine gunner positioned at WN62, commenced firing at 06:35 hours. His position, representing one of the few undamaged by the preliminary bombardment, commanded excellent fields of fire across Omaha Beach. In his 2005 memoir, WN62, Erinnerungen an Omaha Beach, he stated that he fired 13,500 rounds over a 9-hour period. While Sevelow made claims of massive casualties, military historians note that his position, though undeniably deadly, represented only one of many factors contributing to the Omaha Beach casualty figures, and that specific numbers cannot be verified. What remains certain is that his MG42, capable of firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute in controlled bursts, contributed significantly to what would become known as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders began experiencing what military historians would subsequently term material shock, the mental breakdown resulting from confrontation with overwhelming force. Regardless of how many Americans, British or Canadians fell, more continued to appear. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 additional vessels. Every silenced machine gun position was suppressed by naval gunfire that appeared unlimited. By midday, German positions began reporting critical ammunition shortages. The defensive plans had calculated ammunition expenditure based on repelling a limited assault operation. Nobody had developed plans for this scale of attack. According to Wehrmacht supply documentation, positions that had ammunition calculated for a 3-day engagement exhausted their supplies within hours. Artillery batteries, which formed the backbone of the defence, faced similar crises. The carefully conserved ammunition supplies vanished under the intensity of combat. Attempts to bring forward reserve stocks failed because every road remained under constant Allied fighter-bomber attack. The contrast with Allied firepower was striking. German observers noted that American destroyers would expend hundreds of shells against single targets. While German artillery was rationed to 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day, the German Armoured Reserve, the force that Rommel had insisted must defeat any invasion on the beaches, remained paralysed throughout the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armoured unit positioned close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 10 o'clock hours, 4 hours after the landings had commenced. When the 21st Panzer finally attacked at 16:20 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. According to divisional records, they reached the shoreline between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours, becoming the only German armoured unit to reach the coast on D-Day. However, at 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armoured vehicles on D-Day, approximately 25% of their strength in a single day. The counterattack also encountered specialised Allied armour they had never previously seen. Hobart's funnies, modified tanks equipped with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers and bridging equipment, seemed to belong to a different era of warfare entirely. Throughout D-Day, German units faced a threat they had never encountered at this scale: massive airborne forces operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division British and the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions American created chaos that multiplied their actual strength. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander, was serving in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, proved damning. The Allied airborne operation represented everything German operations had never been: massive, coordinated and properly supplied. Germany dropped battalions, the Allies dropped divisions. German forces were supplied by single aircraft. The Allies maintained endless streams of gliders and transport planes. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralysed German responses. Units refused to move, fearing ambush. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own personnel. The confusion multiplied German problems exponentially. As D-Day progressed, German command and control disintegrated. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance forces, activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables and destroyed relay stations. Radio communications were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General Lieutenant Max Pemsel, serving as Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, attempted to coordinate the defence from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary records increasing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual unit commanders made decisions in isolation, without knowledge of the larger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders assessed their situation. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple locations. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink 1 destroyer, USS Corrie, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength 35%. All coastal strongpoints lost. Artillery 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure despite individual acts of heroism. In a single day, German forces had suffered casualties equivalent to those of a major battle, while the Allies continued landing fresh troops as if D-Day represented merely the beginning, not the climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units attempted to regroup and counterattack. These efforts revealed the full extent of Allied superiority. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and destroyed by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's panzer grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced toward Sword Beach under cover of darkness. According to his memoir, they were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It resembled daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier exposed. The shells arrived from the sea with perfect accuracy. They lost half their strength without encountering a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued landing. The artificial Mulberry harbours were already being assembled, supply ships anchored in organised rows. The invasion wasn't merely succeeding, it was transforming into a permanent presence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they encountered complete interdiction of movement. Every road, railway and bridge remained under constant attack. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have reached the front in one day required up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have required 3 days. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attack without firing a shot at ground forces. The psychological impact proved devastating. If forces couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence it? Meanwhile, Allied logistics operated with stunning efficiency. LSTS, Landing Ship Tank, discharged entire armoured regiments within hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies daily, exceeding what the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men, killed, wounded or missing, roughly equivalent to 2 full divisions. Replacements remained minimal. Meanwhile, Allied strength grew hourly. Carentan fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never previously retreated, withdrew in disorder. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydter, reported to higher headquarters, "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British military records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers in the Battle of Villers-Bocage within 15 minutes. German propaganda seized upon this victory as proof that German arms could still prevail. Yet even this victory revealed the futility of the German position. Wittmann's Tiger tank, disabled in the battle, was replaced by the Germans with difficulty. The British losses were replaced within hours. The tactical brilliance of individual German soldiers could not overcome industrial mathematics. Wittmann himself, credited with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed, whether by British gunner Joe Eakins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or Canadian forces remains disputed. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace was eliminated by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th provided another psychological blow. This major port, fortified over 4 years and garrisoned by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell after 5 days of serious fighting. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, commanding the garrison, had proclaimed he would defend Cherbourg to the last bullet. Instead, he surrendered on June 26th. In his post-war interrogation, he explained that resistance became meaningless against unlimited enemy resources, a theme that would echo throughout German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, beginning July 25th, delivered the knockout punch to German forces in Normandy. According to official U.S. Army Air Force records, the preparatory bombardment involved 1,503 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 4,100 tons of bombs in a concentrated area just 7,000 feet wide and 2,500 yards deep. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B. "My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men. The bombing proved so intense that it killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theatre, who was observing from what was thought to be a safe distance. If American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12th to 21st, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. According to Allied intelligence reports confirmed by post-war German records, approximately 10,000 Germans died in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. Over 300 tanks and armoured vehicles were destroyed, along with 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers attempting to escape described scenes of apocalyptic destruction. Roads were carpeted with dead horses and burning vehicles. Allied fighter bombers attacked in waves every 20 minutes. Artillery fell continuously. The systematic destruction was so complete that many soldiers simply gave up, preferring captivity to certain death. The final accounting of the Normandy campaign tells a story of complete German defeat. German losses from June 6th to August 31st totaled approximately 320,000 casualties, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, 210,000 missing or captured. They lost 2,300 tanks, virtually all armour in France, and 2,127 aircraft. Allied losses numbered 209,672 casualties, with replacements exceeding losses daily, approximately 4,000 tanks lost and replaced within weeks, and 4,101 aircraft lost from a force exceeding 13,000. The disparity revealed the fundamental truth. Germany was fighting an attritional battle it could not win against an enemy with virtually unlimited reserves. Professional German military officers provided the most objective assessments of the disaster. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich Eberbach, who assumed command in Normandy after Rommel was wounded, reported to OKW on August 1st. The enemy's material superiority is at least 20-1 in artillery, 10-1 in tanks, and absolute in aircraft. He can replace all losses within days. We cannot replace anything. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, wrote in his 1949 memoir that Normandy proved courage alone could not overcome industrial supremacy. They faced an enemy who had mechanized not just warfare, but victory itself. Feldmarschall Rommel's final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being severely wounded by Allied aircraft, provided the most powerful testament to the Normandy experience. He wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle is nearing its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to tell. I must beg you to draw the necessary conclusions without delay." This represented military language for complete defeat. Rommel, Germany's most celebrated commander, was informing Hitler that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign revealed that World War II had become a production war. German soldiers witnessed American industrial capacity that defied their comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant alone produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at peak production. American factories produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944. Allied ammunition expenditure in one day exceeded German production in a month. A single American division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps. Hans von Luck, reflecting on Normandy in his memoir, wrote that they learned modern war was not about tactics or courage, but about production. The Americans had turned war into an industrial process. They manufactured victory on assembly lines. The German soldiers who survived Normandy were psychologically transformed. They had witnessed the complete invalidation of everything they had been taught about warfare, racial superiority, and national destiny. Heinrich Sevelow, the machine gunner of WN62, spent the rest of his life haunted by his D-Day experience. In his 2005 memoir, he wrote about meeting American D-Day veterans, noting that they all realized they had been young men thrown into an industrial slaughterhouse. His 13,500 rounds meant nothing against their unlimited replacements. Friedrich von der Heydte, the paratrooper commander, became a professor of international law after the war. He wrote that Normandy taught them that the era of warrior heroes was over. War had become a matter of industrial capacity, and they had challenged the world's greatest industrial power with horses and outdated dreams. D-Day, from the German perspective, was not merely a military defeat, but a complete ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their cause, and their capabilities was catastrophically wrong. They had expected to face weak, divided democracies. Instead, they encountered an alliance that had transformed war into an industrial process of overwhelming efficiency. They witnessed democracy's arsenal in action, unlimited ships, planes, tanks, and supplies flowing from factories whose capacity exceeded German comprehension. The German defenders of Normandy learned that modern war was won not on battlefields, but in factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most productive societies. They discovered that the Western Allies had revolutionized warfare, turning it into a mathematical equation where production statistics mattered more than tactical brilliance. Heinrich Sevelow began June 6th believing the invasion would be thrown back within hours. He ended it surrounded by thousands of empty shell casings, watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements land on the beach his position was supposed to command. His experience embodied the larger German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical success drowned in strategic impossibility. The beaches of Normandy became not just a battlefield, but a revelation. German soldiers witnessed the future of warfare, and it belonged to the societies that could produce the most material and apply it most efficiently. They had brought courage, training, and determination to the battle. The Allies brought unlimited industrial production. In attempting to hold back the Allied invasion, the German defenders might as well have been trying to hold back the tide itself. They fired until their barrels melted, fought until their ammunition ran out, and watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The mathematics of modern war had rendered their courage irrelevant. The German soldiers who faced D-Day learned history's hardest lesson. In the age of industrial warfare, nations that could not match their enemies' production were doomed to defeat, regardless of their soldiers' skill or sacrifice. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in its full, terrifying efficiency. Their defeat was not just military, but total, a crushing demonstration that the Nazi vision of racial superiority and military dominance had collided with the reality of Allied industrial supremacy and shattered completely. The invasion they had promised to throw back into the sea had instead swept them away, carrying with it the last illusions of German victory.